Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Striketh, and today I'm here to show you another one of my interesting decks that I think that you'll also enjoy playing. This deck is called Nur Be Demons because it's kind of a hybrid between Handlock and Zoolock, and it's actually really effective and a lot of fun. For a long time now, I've really wanted to make demons kind of viable, and while some of them are okay, like Flame Imp, there's a lot of them that nobody ever really plays, like Dread Infernal. So with the addition of Void Color, I decided to try and make a deck that would work, and I I seem to have found one. So this deck is pretty straightforward, but we're going to go down all the cards and just talk about them in order so you understand why they're in this deck and my justifications for putting them there. First thing, you're going to look at this deck and be like, Sacrificial Pact is in this deck. What is going on? Yes, nobody, and I mean nobody, plays Sacrificial Pact. Destroy a demon, restore 5 health to your hero for 0. And you're like, that sounds really good. And usually it's kind of a dead card because nobody plays demons. However, with the rampant number of Zoolocks and the addition of Void Caller, this card is suddenly relevant. Imagine using a Sacrificial Pact on your own Void Caller to summon your Dread Infernal or your Doomguard from your hand without the battle cry, and it would cost you no mana to summon them in, and you would also gain 5 health. This is a super powerful change that's kind of just come into the game. I think you're really going to see more of these demon decks popping up because they seem very viable to me. I've certainly had a ton of fun with it so far. So one Sacrificial Pact is good. I don't think you can really justify 2, but one of them is actually quite good. And it saved my life in several games I've played where, you can get down to the wire and, for example, in one Zoolock game I was playing, the opponent had a whole board flooded with minions, and I dumped my Nur Be egg on the board the turn before, and that was all I had on the board. They had like 6 minions on the board, but I had a Hellfire in my hand and Sacrificial Pact. So I was actually able to use my Sacrificial Pact on his own Flame Imp to kill that, gain 5 life back, and then Hellfired all of his stuff to death to kill everything off, and also popped my Nur Be egg on the same turn. So he had nothing on the board. I gained 5 life, and also got a minion on the board. Well, after using the Hellfire, it's gained 2 life, but nevertheless, it's quite nice. He came out with -3, and I came out with +2 from it. And it costs 0 mana to use the Sacrificial Pact there. So that's kind of an extreme example, but I just really like the synergy that Sacrificial Pact has with this deck. And I think it's a very viable card now, and you're going to see it definitely pop up in more decks. So, moving on. Soulfire is a standard card. There's, of course, the risk that comes with a 0-cost 4 damage card, and that's that you discard a random card. I still like having it in a deck. I'm not going to take it out because it's just too good to give up. Sometimes you just have to take the chance and make a sacrifice. RNGesus strikes again. Mortal Coil, I only think you need 1 in this deck. You could justify 2, but it just seems like there's just not enough times where having 2 in my deck is really useful to me, so 1 it is. Ironbeak Owl, kind of a necessity to have in your deck, especially with the large amount of Death Rattle cards that have come out with Naxxramas and all of the various decks that kind of work around having things with secondary effects. So I can't justify not having 2 Ironbeak Owls in this deck, especially for taunts. You don't want to deal with taunts, so silence them and then kill them. Nur Be egg, you can justify removing this card. I think it works extremely well with this deck because you have activators in the deck like the Sun Fury and the Defender of Argus and the Hellfire. So while they can be a little bit slow at times, and there's definitely a potential for them to just sit in your hand or sit in the board and do nothing, I think they do work very well with the deck. They synergize extremely well. And of course, you got my guy Baron Rivendare down here. So you can potentially get 4 Nerubians out of 2 eggs, which is just insane. Sun Prairie Protector, kind of a necessity in any kind of handlock. And while this isn't quite a handlock, it's more of a hybrid between handlock and Zoolock because it plays well and you don't want to keep cards in your hand the whole time. It's definitely just one of those cards you need. Earthen Ring Farseer. This is the only 3-drop in the deck, And personally, I just think you really need it. You just need the extra healing, especially when you're getting beaten on the entire game. So it's just, I can't justify not having these in the deck. Now, so far you might be thinking, well, what happened to the Drakes or other cards that I usually see in Headlocks? Well, this is a hybrid. You're not really going to sit with a lot of cards in your hand the entire game. So I had to make some cuts to fit more of these faster cards into the deck. But overall, the synergy is quite solid. The deck works really well with all the games I've played with it thus far. So I'm actually quite happy with it, and I think that you can justify removing some of these slower cards that may not necessarily help you in the long run for the cards that I've put into it. Of course, Hellfire, deal 3 damage to all characters. Fantastic card. Helps you with Zoo and all kinds of other decks that you go against. For example, Token Druid. And of course, it's an activator for your egg. Can't justify not having it. Shadow Flame, just an all-around great card, and it's saved my ass so many times. Now, you drop a minion onto the board, like a Void Caller. You go ahead and Shadow Flame him at either that turn or the next turn or whenever. And not only do you get to do 3 damage to everything on the board, but you also get to summon one of the dudes in your hand for free. So in that regard, it's just pretty amazing. And if you happen to have a Baron Rivendare on the board too, then you get super value out of that Void Caller because you can bring in 2 minions for a mana cost of 4. Pretty awesome. Now, Baron Rivendare, your minions trigger their death rattles twice, and this card really helps synergize this deck. It all kind of brings it all together, but the cool thing about Baron is it doesn't rely on him. The deck works fine even if you don't have Baron Rivendare on the board. So that's why I like this deck. I wanted to build a deck that didn't rely entirely on Baron Rivendare. You have things that on their own work well and won't just sit dead in your hand. But if you happen to have a Baron Rivendare on the board, then they're even more effective, and this has won me games. A game I just played, I had literally 4 Nur Be eggs on the board, and I Shadow Flamed one of my minions to kill everything else on my opponent's board, and he just instantly conceded when he saw that. Plus, I had a Prairie Protector, so I was actually able to use Baron as a taunt after that and make him a 1/7 taunt, which is pretty difficult for a Zoolock to get through, especially late game when they burn through a lot of their higher tier cards. And it's quite nice. And if you use a Defender of Argus on him, it becomes a 2/8, which we have another 2/8 taunt they've added into the game recently, and he's just as much of a pain to deal with as well. So, all in all, Baron Rivendare, he can stand on his own, but he's also just a really good card to have in the deck since he synergizes so well with everything. Defender of Argus, talked about this already. Give adjacent minions +1/+1. This adds a lot of survivability to your deck, and is also another activator for your eggs. You can drop that, make your egg a 1/3, start attacking stuff, eventually activate it, and all in all, it's just an overall good card to have since it works so well with all the other cards in the deck. Void Caller. This is the new card just added this week with the Naxxramas military quarter. Death Rattle. Put a random demon from your hand into the battlefield. And that is why, my friends, I have Doomguard and Dread Infernal in the deck. Doomguard's Battle Cry. Discard 2 random cards. You only see this in Zoolock because they usually just don't care. They just want to get cards out onto the battlefield, control the board, and kill you as quickly as possible. However, with the Void Caller, you can have a Doomguard in your hand, and when the Void Caller dies, it'll summon the Doomguard out onto the board for you for free. The Battle Cry doesn't trigger. However, it still has charge. So that turn, you can actually use it and attack something. It's so crazy and so good. I really just, I love the Void Caller edition. And while you should try and mulligan for it in most cases, you don't necessarily need to rely on it. If you don't have any demons in your hand, if you don't have Void Caller, you're usually quite fine with everything else. And that's another reason why this deck works, because everything just kind of synergizes together, and that's what you really need for any deck. You need it to not rely on a specific combination to win, because it's going to become unreliable. So, Void Caller is a fantastic addition to the deck, adds so many potential options, but again, isn't something that you need to win the game. Now, Doomguard, again, I was thinking of like which demons would be the best to add into the deck without making it an overly top-heavy demon deck, because there's a lot of demons you just don't really need or want in the deck. Doomguard, 5/7 with charge, and it's just, to me, the only, aside from the Dread Infernal, real option out of all of the demons to just put into this specific deck, especially since there's not a lot of fantastic 5-drops otherwise. So, I mean, just having this in your deck makes your deck much more powerful and allows you to chip your opponent down very, very quickly, while not relying on the slowness that you usually find with Handlock. With Handlock, you want to usually have a whole bunch of cards in your hand so you can set up taunts and just whittle your opponent down with big minions over time. This kind of takes the middle ground approach where you're able to kill your opponent without necessarily any massive burst or having a specific win condition. It's just a kind of all-around solid deck. Of course, Loatheb, Battlecry enemy spells cost 5 more next turn. This card is just so amazing. You can put it in almost any deck. It's a 5 cost 5/5, and being able to drop this at the right time can completely screw your opponent over, especially if it's like a priest or a paladin or a miracle rogue or a freeze mage or even a control warrior, something like that. So I like having this in the deck, and once the Battlecry has been used, he's just a 5/5 on the board. So after that, I usually consider Loatheb as a really good Shadow Flame target. So I drop him, I use a Battlecry, they can't do anything next turn. I'll hit him in the face for 5, and then, or hit one of the minions if they have really high HP and I need to get rid of it. And then I'll Shadow Flame it and just clear their board. So he's kind of really annoying for them to deal with in that regard, because, you know, the 5 attack helps to clear a lot of stuff off the board, but at the same time it also cripples their ability to cast spells for an entire turn. So having him in the deck, really solid all around. Sludgebelcher, one of the most annoying additions in Naxxramas for your opponents to deal with. There's a lot of decks that run him now, and he also synergizes really well with Baron Rivendare. When he dies, he'll summon 2 1/2 slimes with taunts, which is 2 more taunts that they have to get through. I can't really see not having him in this deck. You know, sometimes with this deck you want to slow your opponents down. You still want to taunt up like you usually would with a Handlock. So having Sludgebelcher in the deck is all around solid, makes sense, and synergizes with the whole Death Rattle theme. So I'm really fond of him overall. Siphon Soul, kind of a no-brainer. 2 I can't justify, but one of them, definitely really nice if there's just a really out-of-control minion on the board that you need to get rid of, or if there's just one of those situations where you need a 3 health desperately, and this will do it for you. Dread Infernal. I love this card. It's a 6 cost 6/6, and you can get it for free on the board with Voidcaller. But if you just want to drop it on the board, it deals 1 damage to all other characters. So it's fantastic against Zoo, or even just the aggro decks that you see in the ladder. You drop it on the board, and everything with 1 life is dead. So, got a Paladin that's getting a little bit out of control, drop a Dread Infernal, and poof, all of their stuff is gone. So, I really like this card. It's versatile, because, you know, it can function as removal, but you can also get it on the board for free with Voidcaller. So, all in all, he's just such a great card that it fits so well in this deck that I can't justify not having him in the deck. I think that you should definitely consider leaving him in no matter what, because I can't really imagine anything else that would work better in this particular deck that could replace Dread Infernal. And lastly, Molten Giants, but no Mountain Giants. And why? Well, because like I said earlier, you're not going to have a ton of cards sitting in your hand the entire time. You're going to be using the cards in your hand, and on a fairly regular basis, basically, you just aren't going to sit there with 9 or 10 cards in your hand the entire game like the typical Handlock will. So Molten Giant makes more sense in this case, because you are going to take damage. There is kind of a setup time for this deck where you have to get things going, you have to get your mana up, and you have to kind of just get things all put together, and then you can kind of unleash hell, but it's not as slow as the normal handlock is. So basically, you can hop into a game, take some damage, drop some Molten Giants, and taunt them up, and you're pretty much all set. You know, the Earthen Ring Farseers will help keep you topped off. The Sacrificial Pact will also help keep you topped off. And the Siphon Soul, if you really need it, will also help keep you topped off. So you have plenty of healing to kind of regain the health that you would lose through something like Dread Infernal. So, all in all, Molten Giants fit the theme of the deck. They fit into the deck, and I like them. But if you want more burst, you could, of course, take them out, and you could put a Leroy Jenkins and a Faceless Manipulator in their place. That would certainly work, and, you know, it would, of course, give you more burst, and it would probably be more reliable. But the Molten Giants, when you get low on HP, are just so good. Having a 0-cost Molten Giant, or 2 0-cost Molten Giants, and then being able to Defender of Argus them is just too good for me to pass up. So that's the deck, Thar Be Demons, and that's kind of how it all works. In the coming days, I'll try and get a game or two up so you guys can see how it plays. I wish I was recording earlier when I was playing this deck because it was just so much fun. But if you have any questions about the deck, let me know. Otherwise, feel free to give it a whirl, customize it to your own needs, and let me know how it works for you. Thanks for watching, folks, and this is Striketh, checking out.